Last month, Enshrouded's developers announced something amazing for the full upcoming 1.0 release that might just be a massive game changer. If you haven't seen the announcement yet, the full release will include brand new logic features for Enshrouded's building system. This includes buildable units such as traps, as well as logic elements that sound like they'll be able to trigger events in the game. These event triggers could give players the power to set something up as simple as switching lights on and off, to something potentially as complex as designing a harrowing maze full of deadly traps that players have to escape before a timer runs out. Right now, Enshrouded primarily features a static form of base building, meaning the structures that players build don't have any shape-changing abilities or interactive features to work with, aside from doors, water walls, and drains. With these features alone, players have still managed to come up with an endless number of impressive builds, from cozy cottage shires to breathtaking castles and fortresses. With the arrival of the upcoming logic features, the full release stands to add on top of that already solid building foundation, changing the building system to allow for even more fun and imaginative base builds. In this video, we'll go over exactly what kind of logic elements are being added, as well as how this could allow players to build with limitless potential for interactivity. If you're not familiar with the game already, Enshrouded is an open-world survival game with RPG elements and an emphasis on exploring, puzzle solving, crafting, and base building, developed by the German studio Keen Games. If you'd like a more in-depth look at what features the game currently has to offer, check out my review video in the description below. Similar to games like Minecraft, Enshrouded is voxel-based, meaning nearly every bit of the environment can be shaped and terraformed. The building block system in Enshrouded will be very familiar to those coming from Minecraft, with every block you place being cubes, aside from terrain. As of right now though, Enshrouded lacks something similar to what you might see in Minecraft with what the game's redstone is capable of, like power and complex piston mechanisms to shift elements within builds and environments. However, with the full release slated for Enshrouded this autumn, the devs are planning to add logic to the building system, which will allow for chainable events to trigger, not at all unlike the way redstone works in Minecraft. Adding in this kind of automation to the game could potentially put Enshrouded's building system more on par with games like Minecraft, and may even make it one of the top survival crafting games to build interactive environments in. In their most recent dev update, the devs mentioned that the logic features coming to Enshrouded will be similar to the ones found in their previous game, Portal Knights. We'll cover what those features are, how they worked in Portal Knights, and how that system might look in Enshrouded. Currently in Enshrouded, elements with basic functions like doors, water fountains, drains, and dams are readily available to craft and place around your base. There are also some elements that aren't craftable that can be found in the world, such as switches that trigger gates or traps on and off, along with several types of traps. It probably wouldn't be too far of a stretch to assume that these could eventually be integrated into the logic system as buildable elements. For the full release of Enshrouded, up first for logic features from the announcement are logic elements. While the devs weren't entirely clear in the announcement what they plan to add for logic elements exactly, and there isn't a clear labeled section for logic elements specifically in their former game, Portal Knights, they are likely referring to the addition of different elements that you can build in Enshrouded that have varying logical states. Logical states in this context might mean a door that has two different states, like open or closed, a light, which could have a state of on or off, or a switch or lever, which may have an up and down state. If we're able to add objects to our bases like that with multiple states in Enshrouded, and if we're able to potentially make triggers or conditions for those object states to change, that could lead to some very intriguing options for building in the game. And although the devs were vague about what logic elements might specifically be coming in Enshrouded's feature updates, I think it's reasonable to assume that since some of these features existed in Portal Knight's building system, scattered throughout the interactive elements category in their building menus, we may see them integrated similarly into Enshrouded as well. Logic gates also currently exist in Portal Knights, and they're a named separate feature rather than somewhat vague interactive elements like logic elements are in the game, so we have a better understanding with how these might look in Enshrouded. In Portal Knights, these elements work as the backbone of the logic system. With the help of a special wand, labeled as a connection tool in the game, players can route conditions through gates with statements like and, or, and not. For example, players can connect multiple switches to a door through two AND gates and one NOT gate that tell the door to open and close only when the correct combination of switches are lowered. These logic gates can direct the flow of various elements this way while also stacking, allowing for even more complex functions for one's base. In Enshrouded, this sort of feature would allow for tons of unique and memorable ways to interact with bases that build-focused players could use to engage with the rest of the community. This concept could be used to make a code or button sequence for entry into a secret layer hidden away in a player's base, keeping the section room absolutely impenetrable to anyone else without the proper knowledge. The player could then potentially scatter clues, such as numbers or symbols correlating to the code, behind interactive puzzles for others to decipher. Thankfully though, the combination of liking this video and subscribing to my channel are real easy codes to crack, as all you need to do is smash that like button and hit subscribe. You can even click that bell to set the notifications to all, and just like that, you'll be notified every time I drop a new video. Of course, the devs haven't explicitly confirmed all of these options, but the capability to create systems to this extent did exist in Portal Knights, so it's likely we may see some form of this appear in Enshrouded. Next is enemy spawners, and on paper, the addition of enemy spawners may sound simple and straightforward, but a look into how they work in Portal Knights gives implications that this feature could have some pretty wild applications in Enshrouded. In Portal Knights, you're able to place an individual enemy in any valid build zone. Here's where things get interesting though. Using the connection tool, players can make it so that an event can be triggered to spawn an enemy unit, or an event can trigger upon the defeat of that unit. In practice, you can use this to make a spawn chain, starting with a button that spawns an enemy, and upon its defeat, it'll spawn more enemies. Players can then subsequently link harder and harder enemies, progressively upping the level of difficulty to the hardest opponents available. These spawn and defeat events aren't just limited to summoning more enemies though. These events are also compatible with the aforementioned logic gates and elements, allowing players to devise highly intricate scenarios if they so choose. If the enemy spawners that get added to Enshrouded work similarly to the previous title, and many bosses happen to make it into the pool of spawnable enemies, then the possibility of a complex simulated dungeon crawler would be both very real and so insane. I've already been amazed by how much creativity I've seen from the rest of Enshrouded's community so far, so it's hard to even imagine the incredible dungeon builds that the player base could design given this much freedom. And finally, as mentioned earlier, there are several traps that can be found in the world of Enshrouded, such as molten boulder traps, spark traps, and spike traps, among others that could likely be integrated into the logic system as traps. There are also a few trap types found in Portal Knights that would make for a welcome addition for good variety, such as the rotating cannon type traps. These traps paired with the aforementioned logic gates and logic elements could give players the capability to come up with interactive mazes that could even surpass the ancient spire puzzles already found in Enshrouded. Players could spend countless hours getting lost in near-endless labyrinths with their friends as they solve their way through the community's cleverly made courses. Depending on the flexibility of the logic system too, players could even potentially set up a bullet hell type of minigame, pairing enemy spawn events with these traps for a real heart-pounding challenge. With the addition of traps as buildable elements, players will likely be able to make all sorts of quote-unquote harmless and friendly mazes to send their friends and family through, making for plenty of thrilling experiences to be had with this feature. These logic building features will arrive with the second iteration of adventure sharing, a feature that will allow players to easily share their creations with the rest of the player base, making players' highly intricate and breathtaking creations experienceable firsthand by the rest of the game's community. Before these features are introduced into the game though, there are a few things that the developers may want to consider adding to the building system in Enshrouded that I think could elevate the interactive experience even further. One such feature would be the addition of a buildable unit that spawns restorative orbs, much like the ones that spawn from skills found in the skill tree. With the Stamina Orb Spawner, players could create obstacle courses for grappling or gliding through, and place these spawners in locations to extend the distance that a player would be able to fly or grapple to. This would allow players to create fun and engaging platform puzzles for others without them having to pause mid-course while they wait for their stamina to regenerate. Mana and health orb spawners may be a little less necessary with the presence of potions in the game, but perhaps they could find use in player-made combat dungeons, placed around certain spots as a second strategy to top a player off. That would then give players a tactical choice to position themselves closer to an orb spawner should they need it in the heat of battle, bringing good variety into dangerous encounters. Overall, the addition of orb spawners could be a much welcome feature for builders to add to their bases, as it has much potential to provide all sorts of creative building utility to players. Another feature that could integrate nicely into the building system would be flame altar checkpoints. Not as in more flame altar bases that allow you to teleport to them, but the ones that save your position and respawn you, like the flame altars you often find at the entrances to elixir wells. I think the devs adding in an allotted number of these checkpoints per base altar could work nicely for use in bases built as things like obstacle courses. This inclusion of flame altar checkpoints into the list of buildable elements could allow for players to set them up to function in the same way that they do in the hollow halls. This way, altars help you advance through section zones without letting you teleport to them directly to skip past areas. Ultimately, this incorporation of flame altars gives players the choice on how they want their visitors to progress through their base setup, be it a maze or dungeon. An updraft current that lifts gliders higher in the air is another fun mechanic that already exists in the game. I could see the devs implementing this as a fan block, or perhaps some sort of heat draft producing emplacement to better fit with the setting and technical simplicity of the world. A placeable element such as this could enable players to create gliding obstacle courses that go further than the best glider is currently capable of, allowing players to set up fun glide racing challenges with their friends. A feature that could be a really nice quality of life improvement for the building system in general would be a tool or option to select sections of previously built structures in rectangular portions. Players could then either shift and adjust the selected sections as they see fit, or save them as prefabricated structure plans, aka presets. A good example of this can be taken from Trailmakers, another game primarily centered around its building system. While in the building environment for Trailmakers, players are able to click and drag their cursor, which creates a rectangular zone that selects everything within. Above their selection, players can choose to rotate, duplicate, delete, or even save the segmented structure for use somewhere else. This kind of preset saving feature could make it so much easier for players to create even more complex, fractal-like structures, like those repeating patterns you see in nature, while also being a huge time saver for base building overall. One thing that may be a big ask from the developers, but could also potentially be a very fun feature, would be the ability to shift chunks of the environment around using the logic elements, similar to what pistons are capable of in Minecraft. With this kind of feature, players could create moving works of art for their bases. From functional conveyor belts that could help gather materials, to unfoldable drawbridges that could span mountaintops, this feature could be a massive game changer for automating environments. However, seeing as this idea for a feature probably doesn't have any form of implementation in the game for the devs to build on top of, this sort of idea may be less likely to happen, at least not by the release of Enshrouded 1.0. Despite this, if Keen could figure out a way to make a similar feature work, then Enshrouded might stand to reach levels of creative freedom and complexity on par with what Minecraft's Redstone is capable of. All in all, with Enshrouded's full release coming this autumn, it's looking like the game has a very exciting future ahead of it, especially in terms of building, as the devs do plan to add some impressive features that will allow player creativity to thrive even further. Have you played Minecraft or Portal Knights? What did you think of their building systems? What do you think Enshrouded could take away from those systems? And what are you hoping to build in the upcoming full release of Enshrouded? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for stopping in. If you liked the video, drop it a like, and subscribe if you haven't already and want more survival game content like this. And to everyone who's subscribed, thank you again for sticking around. Your support and interest in this channel motivates me to keep things going.